the Partnership for Jewish Schools. Here in the UK, we're all watching with horror as events in Israel unfold, and as we mourn the tragic losses, we pray for the safe return of hostages and for the safety of the soldiers that have been called up to defend the state of Israel. We're aware that some of the British press and social media are fueling fears for all of us about the global increase in anti-Semitism. Everyone in our community will have been affected in some way by the current war in Israel. The fact that over 2,000 people have signed up for this event tonight shows that we all feel the need for some guidance, some support, and the importance of being part of a community at this time. Although the evening was originally aimed at parents in Jewish schools, we welcome parents of children in non-Jewish schools who may be struggling with different experiences and feelings. We hope tonight will offer you all some support at this time. Thank you for showing up, and in turn, showing up for your children who rely on us as parents and role models. We acknowledge that this isn't an easy time to be a parent. And however hard we may try to hide it, our fears are undoubtedly projected onto our children. This evening's meeting is a chance for you to hear from Mark Gardner of the CST and from Helen Williams, Detective Chief Superintendent of the Counter-Terrorism Unit, who will talk to us about how they are protecting our schools and our community, and also from Drs. Talia Green and Dr. Hannah Abrahams on how we can support and talk to our children at such a challenging time. We're mindful that not all children will react and communicate in the same way. Some children, including those with neurodevelopmental conditions and mental health difficulties, may be experiencing increased emotional and behavioral challenges. Information from tonight and additional resources will be shared on the Pajes website, and the link will be sent to all those that registered, together with a recording of our presentations. In the last 24 hours, we've received over 150 questions for our panel, and we have sent these to our speakers who will address most of the themes within their presentations. So I'd like to hand over to Mark Gardner of the CST, our community organization, and to thank you for all you do for our community.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Gardner. I'm Chief Executive at CST Community Security Trust. The first thing I want to say is that we understand your concerns. We share your concerns. They're exactly why CST does what it does every day of the year. Our staff are parents of Jewish children who go to the same schools as yours do. We have the same concerns that you do. But I want to try and speak about those concerns this evening in a way that gives you facts and information. How you react to those facts and information, how you personally relate to issues of personal safety, the safety and security of your children, your attitude to anti-Semitism, that depends on you. That depends upon you as an individual, given your background, your life experience, all those things that are completely beyond my knowledge. We will give you the facts of what we are doing, and we ask only that you bear those facts in mind. I'm going to cover the physical security and the personal safety angle, and the policing and the care aspects will be covered by other speakers here this evening. Security. It's always an assessment of what's happening in the here and now and what we believe will happen in the near future. We know, and I think most of you know, that when Israel is at war, the number of anti-Semitic incidents, by which I mean race, hatred, crimes against Jews, it increases. It increases significantly. Typically, it goes up by 4 or 5 times its usual rate. That's what we've seen time and time again, and that is what's happening right now. This afternoon, we put out a statement on our website that said we had so far seen 89 anti-Semitic incidents from Saturday through to today. Now, at the end of today, that figure stands at over 130 anti-Semitic incidents. Very few of those are violent in any way. Most of them involve verbal abuse. Typically, it's something like Free Palestine being shouted at a Jew in the street. How many are against school children? 6. Those have been verbal abuse and online bullying. Some have been against children, Jewish children, in non-Jewish schools. Others have been against children on their way to or from a Jewish school. Now, the true figure will obviously be higher than that. Not everything gets magically reported to CST, but I ask you to please bear those figures in mind when you try and somehow calculate what is the risk right now. I also want to stress that CST with Maccabi GB runs a program called Streetwise that is specifically dedicated to telling Jewish children how to behave when they are out in public in order to reduce the chance of them encountering trouble. It tells them to look down the street, not have their head buried in their mobile phone. It tells them to sit downstairs on the bus, not upstairs. It tells them to get on a busy tube carriage, even if they have to stand, rather than an empty tube carriage. It tells them to go into a shop to avoid trouble. It tells them to go up to the police to avoid trouble. It tells them to avoid trouble before it comes to them. This week already, Streetwise has delivered classes to 3,500 Jewish children, both in Jewish schools and in non-Jewish schools, where it's organized via Jewish societies. Please make use of Streetwise. Please go to the Streetwise website and see what they have to offer. It's a terrific program. My own children have done it, as have, I think, probably all the children of the staff here at CST. Moving on now to the police. We have had a huge, huge amount of contact with the Security Minister and with the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary was in CST's office the other day. We discussed all of the security and safety measures for the Jewish community, and schools have been a priority in every single conversation because we know that is what matters the most to our community. We've given British Transport Police all the main bus routes, all the biggest bus stops that Jewish children stand at in the mornings and use in the afternoons, the main tube stations that they use, the main tube routes that they travel on. We've done the same for Manchester and other places around the country. We have a direct mechanism to feed into British Transport Police where and when incidents occur so that they can adapt their policing accordingly, because what we find every time Israel is at war is that incidents do occur on public transport. Obviously, they occur in the street as well, around Jewish schools, which is why the police have significantly increased the number of police cars that are driving past Jewish schools, that are slowing down as they go past the Jewish schools, so that the children and yourselves and the security guards at those schools can see the police and be comforted by their presence. Yes, we want to see police officers stood outside every school when the kids come in and when the kids leave, but it's not possible. It can be done in some boroughs, given the police levels there and given how many Jewish schools there are. But in a place like Barnet, which has 67 Jewish schools, the police resource is not there. I'm very sorry, I wish it was, but those are the realities within which we have to operate. I also want to note here that the government gives £15 million a year for commercial, so not CST, but commercial security guards to work at Jewish schools and at synagogues. What that means is that every single Jewish school can, if it wishes, and just about every single one does, they have security guards that are paid for by this grant. In many cases, the school chooses to have more guards, and that is supplemented by perhaps yourselves as parents paying for that service. Because the £15 million can only go so far. There are over 200 Jewish schools. So we can't just give a limitless amount of money to every single school for guards, but the guards are in place. And CST and the schools have spent millions of pounds, and that's not an exaggeration, on security measures. Obviously, not every school is equally protected. But when you look at the biggest schools like JFS and JCOS, literally CST worked with the architects. That is why the schools are built so far back from the main road, because of the threat, God forbid, of a truck bomb. Now, most years, some of you might think that the security is actually a bit over the top. Why is there so much security? Why are there gates? Why are there guards? Why do I have to show my details before I can get into the school? The security is there because of now. The security is there because we know that Israel is at war. It might not happen every year, but it does happen. That's why the schools, where we've worked with the schools and with the parents to make the infrastructure, that's why it looks the way that it does. It's for moments such as these. So when we're being asked to increase security, which I completely understand, please appreciate the security that is in place is there because of times like this. You cannot suddenly make security appear as if by magic. You have to have it in place so that when times like this, when it's absolutely needed, it can be implemented and done properly. That is why the security is there. Where we can increase it, we will do so. I promise you of that. Many parents have asked what they can do to help with security, and we deeply, deeply appreciate that. A lot of schools will have rotas, which they might describe as security, or they might describe as assistance for getting children in to the school quickly in the morning. We are there to assist. We're there to provide training. We're here to help make that happen as best we possibly can. Uniforms. I know that there is a debate as to whether or not to tell Jewish children to remove uniforms that identify them as being Jewish. I understand that. I remember vividly as a Jewish primary school child suffering anti-Semitic abuse on the bus and in the street on the way home from school because I had on my Jewish school cap, because I had on my Jewish school blazer. So I get it. We all get it here. You have to decide, and the schools have to decide. This is not advice that CST has given to anybody, because you have to decide the balance between, is it emotionally somehow hurtful to your child to tell them that they have to take this off or not? It's a difficult decision. But we have not instructed this to occur at the moment. Social media and rumors on social media. Today, it has been very, very difficult for the staff at CST to do their job because of social media being used to spread a Hamas message about a day of rage that will occur on Friday of this week. It is not a hoax. It is real. But it does not, as a lot of people have said, it does not call for attacks on Jews. It calls for Muslims and Arabs to demonstrate on behalf of Palestinians. It does not call for violence. Now, that is a pedantic distinction, because when people go out and demonstrate, obviously they can turn to violence. I fully understand that. But calls such as this have occurred again and again and again. Every time Israel is at conflict, Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran call for a day of rage against Israel and against its supporters around the world. Yes, we take Friday very seriously. Yes, people might get wound up by it. I do not believe there is a reason for schools to close. I do not believe there is a reason for synagogues to close. I do not believe there is a reason for you to stay off the streets. And I certainly do not believe there is a reason for you not to send your children to school because of this call. We have to get things into perspective. Also, social media. Yesterday, the staff were unable to do their work because of a rumor that Hamas was about to post horrendous material on TikTok, and apparently parents had to remove TikTok from their children's phones. You have to be very, very mindful of what your children are accessing on their phones. You have to be at a time like this. But yesterday's rumor was just that. It was a rumor. We were in contact with TikTok. We were in contact with Meta. The engineers at both companies were fully on the alert for this, and it did not materialize. But terrorism is about spreading fear and spreading alarm. Hamas did film their atrocities. Hamas are pushing those atrocities out through social media. You and your children may well have accessed those images. That is why you have to know what your children are looking at online, because the mental damage, I suggest, will be very, very severe. So regardless of what is flying around in terms of this will happen, that will happen, you need to know what's going on with your child and their use of social media. On Monday, what flew around was the image of the shattered glass of a restaurant in Golders Green. We were assured by the police that this was not anti-Semitic. It looked it, I'll give you that, but it wasn't. The fact is that 2 nearby shops were broken into for their cash registers. One of the shops was Jewish, the other one was not. There was Free Palestine graffiti painted on 2 bridges at Golders Green, but that happened over 2 hours before those 2 shops got smashed up. So please, we are all nervous enough already, but do not make things worse by spreading stuff on social media that is not verified. Finally, CST is not somehow separate to our Jewish community. We are you, our staff and our volunteers, the money that we invest in schools, the training that we give, everything only comes from you. We're not the police. We're not the government. We can only be as strong as you allow us to be. And we are strong. We have a budget of over £9 million. We have over 100 staff. We have 2,000 volunteers. And we have a 24/7 control center here at CST that is in constant contact with every single school. We have infrared perimeters set up at the schools. If someone breaks those perimeters during the day or through the night, it flashes up within our control center. We can feed from there direct to the police control center in Lambeth. We can feed from there direct to police cars that respond to incidents. Every security guard working at your schools is connected by radio to our control center. We have the biggest, the most professional, the best resourced Jewish community security service in the world here in CST, and it works for you. But it has to work in partnership with you. It has to. You have to be part of us. And if that means being strong, being responsible, and working with us, that's what it takes. That's what it takes right now. And things will get worse. You know that. You know the situation between Israel and Hamas. You know what is likely to happen on the ground. And you know that there will be more anti-Semitism, and it will intensify here in the UK. So we need to get ready for that. We have to be resilient. We have to stand as strong as we can. CST will be there for you. Please be there for us also. Thank you. And now I ask Detective Chief Superintendent Helen Williams, who is a very senior figure in British counter-terrorism policing and has worked with us for a very, very long time. She's a good, good friend. Helen.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everybody. As said, I am Detective Chief Superintendent Helen Williams. I am the National Coordinator for Counter-Terrorism, Protect and Prepare. Firstly, I wish to express my sincere condolences to everybody that is affected by the atrocities that are currently ongoing in Israel. I know how it impacts on all communities, and especially the Jewish community, and the loss of life is absolutely tragic. I am also joined tonight by Commander Owain Richards of the Metropolitan Police, who, after I've spoken, will talk about what the Met Police are doing specifically in relation to schools. But please be assured, this is shared across the UK with all forces, and all forces are able to implement similar activities and deployments. My role as a national coordinator is to ensure that what each force is doing is shared, everyone is aware, and to bring in any intelligence, any community tensions, to understand that so that it is constantly reviewed. It is absolutely key at the moment that vigilance is our greatest weapon against any attacks that may occur. I will say that at this time, the intelligence does not show any escalated threat towards schools or other premises. Sadly, you all live with anti-Semitism, and that is why schools, synagogues, and other premises already have protective security. So whilst I appreciate how frightened people are with what is going on, with the threat against you, it must be incredibly worrying. But the protective security measures in place are proportionate and commensurate with the current threat. Having seen a number of questions, I noticed that people are asking why they can't have armed police, why other police are not there day in at the schools. It is genuinely something that is looked at, and if there is any specific threat or any intelligence that comes in relation to any premises, it will be acted upon and it will be dealt with. There is obviously the 999 system, should anybody have an immediate either threat to life or an incident that is occurring. But also I would urge everybody to speak to your children and ensure that anything that happens or that you see is reported either through 101, through the CST, or if it is necessary to ring 999. Many of you, and this morning we also had questions in relation to public order, flag waving, etc. Now, there are offences in relation to flags, but those are only in relation to flags that represent prescribed organisations. And by that I mean those that the government have declared as terrorist organisations. So therefore, somebody waving a Palestinian flag is not committing an offence per se, but police will look at it and ascertain if there are any offences under public order rather than Terrorism Act. But again, I would say to you, be vigilant, report anything that happens. If it is not reported, we do not have a good picture of what is going on across the UK. And we do need to be looking at that. Social media, as Mark has just said, is something to be aware of. There will be a lot of fake news out there. There will be stuff that is being shown. And I would suggest that you talk to your children, you understand what they're seeing and what they may see. And I know that obviously others will be talking about well-being and how to interact with your children in relation to that. I want to assure you that the police across the UK are working with the CST. We have officers based with them. And as Mark just said, they have a direct contact into us. So if at any point anything happens, it can be looked at and it can be dealt with. We also have joint patrols with the CST, and Mr. Richards will talk about some of the specific actions that Safer Schools officers are being asked to look at within London. I want to give you our assurance that we do not take this lightly. We look at everything that comes in and it will be dealt with. It will be assessed, and if there is any criminal matter that is evident, we will deal with it as robustly as we can. We will not tolerate hate or anti-Semitism in any way. Mr. Richards, I will now hand over to you if you would like to speak to the group? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen and Mark. Can I just also acknowledge the sheer scale of the terror attack by Hamas against Israel on Saturday, and also I fully appreciate how, as parents of children and young people, I cannot imagine how you might be feeling now in terms of the safety and the security of yourselves and your families. I have, through my community engagement contacts here in London, seen and heard and have read incident reports of abuse, of hate, which is completely unacceptable. There is no place for hate in our society. To provide you with some context, my name is Owain Richards. I'm one of the Chief Officers, Commander, City Policing in London. Similar approaches are being taken up and down the country, but specifically I want to give you an insight into the policing response here in London, where we have some of the highest Jewish communities across specific boroughs and indeed across London. I am speaking to you this evening from the Strategic Operations Room here at Lambeth in South London, where I am coordinating the local policing response across three key pillars to support the counter-terrorism effort, to support the Public Order Command, and to ensure that we prevent and detect any crime and disorder that happens through proactive patrols, that we engage and provide reassurance. This is a protective security response, particularly in respect to schools and other vulnerable premises such as synagogues. And critically, the third part of that is to respond effectively through emergency response team policing to incidents that are reported to us here in London, either on 999, 101 non-emergency, or via online or other methods, as Mark has highlighted, through the CST, to ensure that we are taking a victim-centred approach, that we are following up, that we are attending, and that we're dealing robustly with any incidents and crimes that occurred. To put things into perspective from a London viewpoint, we have since Saturday seen approximately 50 anti-Semitic crimes recorded on our Met databases. I must caveat that in relation to there will be crimes that have been reported in the last 24 hours that have yet to be recorded, and there will be many more incidents that have been reported that may not amount. So I want to ensure that we are recognizing that there will be many more incidents and crimes that are happening in communities that may also not be reported. To give you a flavour of some of those incidents as it relates to children, young people and schools, we've had reports of flag waving, free Palestine flags, cars driving and circling around schools, playing Arabic music and frightening, quite frankly, and shouting abuse at school children. Please, as Helen said to you, if you or your children see this behaviour, report to us. We will, wherever possible, seek to attend as soon as practicable. I'm aware of a particular incident that's happened in the Jewish Free School in Barnet, for example, where a 15-year-old boy sent a WhatsApp message of that very issue to his mum, and that was reported to the police. And we then spoke to the family to understand what had happened and to identify if any offences had taken place. We have over 300 dedicated schools officers. They are full-time officers who work in and alongside a number of schools across the city. We have issued specific guidance to schools officers about how to engage with school teachers, with pupils, with school staff. I was on a call with Helen this morning with head teachers and governors to reiterate that message in terms of how we want police officers to engage with schools as a security and also as to provide reassurance. Of course, we cannot have a schools officer in every school. There are over 3,000 schools in total across the city. We are very much focusing on specific Jewish faith schools, but I also acknowledge that there will be Jewish families and young people across multi-faith schools and indeed across main schools across the city. We have over 1,000 neighbourhood policing officers specifically assigned to providing reassurance patrols, security patrols across vulnerable premises and in Jewish communities across the city. And I am tracking those engagements, who they've spoken to, what's been said, what's the level of fear of crime, and capturing that intelligence as well. I know that there has been some questioning about armed policing response in London. And indeed, we do have an armed policing capability in London, sadly, due to the threat from terror and also from lethal firearms. The armed officers are supporting community-based officers in providing specific patrols, particularly around vulnerabilities such as high-profile synagogues and other locations. However, again, this is a response across London. We've seen lots of protests over the last few days as well, and I'm acutely aware of crimes and abuse that can happen as a result of protests. We have a very robust policing command structure in place throughout the week and into the weekend to deal with any protests. And from local policing, I'm linked in to the gold and silver commands for protest policing to ensure that if there are any splinter groups, if there are any convoys of and go into communities, that we have the capacity to then respond and deal with that. I'm also aware, as Mark had mentioned, that we have had hate-fueled graffiti, Free Palestine graffiti sprayed on various locations across the city. We have spoken to Network Rail, British Transport Police, and indeed TfL to ensure that they are painted over, blocked out, and cleaned as is possible. Mark mentioned the restaurant attack at the patisserie in Barnet the other day, and I can assure you that we are keeping an open mind and identifying the motive of all incidents and crimes that are reported to us, and we were maintaining a tracker to ensure that we have responded. And sadly, we will not always get it right. We may not always respond, either due to other pressures or because we have missed a key bit of intelligence. We want to listen to you. We want to restore trust in communities in London, and we want to provide a quality of service. So please, through the CSC contacts, through your local community neighbourhood contacts, tell us if we've got it wrong. Tell us if you haven't had a good service so we can improve it for the next victim and the next caller. I'm going to pause there and hand back to Helen for now, and of course here to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Very much appreciated. No, obviously that was the London specific view, but I would say that those other cities that have seen protests or incidents, for example, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Glasgow, all of them have a similar policing posture to what London is doing. And as I said, it is shared across them. But in reality, there are limitations to what we can do. We cannot do this without you. We work with our communities. We work in partnership with our key strategic partners, including the CST. We work very closely with them in order to protect the Jewish community. And at this time, that is even more important. So please do be vigilant, report anything and everything that we need to know so that we have a full picture of what is happening across the country. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope this has gone some way to letting you know what we are doing within the UK policing to keep you safe. Thank you.
Thank you to Mark, to Helen, and to Owen, and for all you do to physically protect the Jewish community. We'd now like to switch to our emotional responses in protecting our children. And I'm grateful to have Dr. Talia Green and Dr. Hannah Abrahams, who are going to help us to understand how people respond to war and to give some suggestions on how best to support our children at this time.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Dr. Talia Green. I'm an Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology at UCL and a Trauma and Disaster Mental Health Specialist. For some context, I lived in Israel for the last 17 years, and most of my work has been in the sphere of conflict and trauma in the Israeli context. I recently moved back to the UK, and I'm a mum of 3 kids who attend Jewish primary and secondary schools here in the UK. I'm going to be talking about how we can support children and young people in the UK to cope with the situation in Israel at the moment. The first thing I want to say is we are not in Israel, but obviously we're all connected, we're all affected. Many of us, most of us, will have family and friends who live in Israel, and it's normal and in fact expected that we'll have some response to the horrific and terrible and extreme events that we're seeing. We'll find that children and adults will have all kinds of responses, and I'm not going to read all of them out, but I will just highlight a few. So we may see with younger children that they do have difficulty sleeping. We'll see all kinds of emotional responses. They may be more clingy or be naughty, may complain that their tummy or their head hurts. We'll see similar things with older children and with teenagers. But alongside that, you may see things like more complex emotions, feeling guilt or feeling overwhelmed. They may feel isolated or lonely. And I think this is particularly true for Israeli children in the UK who may feel that other people don't understand how it feels for them, and also for Jewish children in non-Jewish schools who may feel more isolated. Sometimes it can affect their functioning at school, difficulty concentrating. They may withdraw socially. They may also complain of aches and pains. And we may find that they find it hard to share their feelings. We also feel these kinds of feelings and these kinds of experiences. And I think it's important to note that sometimes you might feel like you're coping, but sometimes you might feel like you're not coping. And sadly, this doesn't look like a situation that will be resolved very quickly. And we should bear that in mind and be mindful of not burning ourselves out. I want to highlight one model called it's inside out and outside in. It's a psychological model, and we all hold the acute stress within ourselves, inside, under our skin, and we feel it internally. But this is connected to what we have going on around us at the outside level. And this is the external supports that we may have available to us, things that are going on in the community, things that are going on nationally, our local supports. And so understanding how to access those supports and understanding that those supports can also modify or buffer our responses is really important. So there are a few principles that we use when we talk about managing our responses or coping with disasters and with war. And some of them are really key. The first thing is that what we feel is a great sense of threat. And so what we want to give to people is reestablish some sense of safety. So when we work with children, we really want to help them to understand the way that these events do and don't impact on them. What does that mean? It means we try to disentangle threats. What do I feel? How am I feeling at threat? Also, how am I feeling about the people that I know in Israel who are under threat? What do I think about Israel in general and concerns around that? Thinking about what is a physical threat and what's a psychological threat, a more kind of symbolic threat to me and my values and my identity. Try and remind them that they are here with you in the UK. And you can talk about all of the things that CST and the police spoke about now, that the schools are doing and actually do in routine times as well, to help us to stay safe and to protect us. It's really important, though, to acknowledge and validate these worries, anxieties, sadness about the situation, and particularly about people they know. Encourage them to contact those people. That can help to reassure them. It's very important that we maintain daily routines. The familiar will help them to feel safe and normal. And what's very important in this is they may well be feeling very helpless, like they've lost some control. So thinking about things that they can do that can reestablish a sense of control is really key. Things like asking them, oh, would you like to help me plan dinner? Should we cook dinner together? Do you want to choose a book to read or a game to play together? This gives them a sense of agency. Physical comfort and reassurance is obviously key. Give hugs, younger and older kids who might not usually ask for them, and be physically close. Sit with them on the sofa, be with them. Allow children to regress. You might find that they're more dependent than normal. Things that they normally do on their own, they ask you to do with them, for them. This is all normal and expected. We've already mentioned it, but try and manage their exposure to the media. And I think here it's really key that you explain what your concerns are to your children. Explain that there are difficult, horrific, really unpleasant images and videos. They're very scary, and explain to them that once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. And it's also very difficult to stop watching them when you start, that these are things that we're compelled, we all do, even as adults feel compelled to watch and witness. And so we're trying to limit, maybe block, this is a question for people, but think about the apps that have videos that open automatically, where you can just sit there and see a feed of difficult, terrifying images coming one after the other. But I think what's really important is to do this collaboratively. Explain to kids why you're doing it, what you think, what they think. Get them to show you their media feed, the social media feed, so you can actually understand what it is that they're seeing and respond to it. Guide older children to reliable sources of news. You may find that you want to watch the news first and decide whether this is something that would be helpful for them to watch. And if so, you sit with them and watch it together. And then you can respond, follow up, ask them what they've understood from what they watched, if they've got any questions and how they're feeling. We know that a lot of questions have come in about how you talk to children about the situation. And what's key is that you give brief, simple, honest, and direct information. Don't give too much information. You start the conversation and then you let their questions lead the way. It's really important to actually answer the question that they actually asked you and not give extra and unnecessary information they didn't request. We actually find that children are better at regulating than we expect, and they ask information that they are prepared to hear. It's really important that we avoid euphemistic and ambiguous language, words that they can't understand. Be clear, explain, but think about how to make this age appropriate. You don't have to have the same conversation with every child you have in your house. And obviously, older children may well have already heard a lot about the situation and they can access the information independently. So there, your role is to help them to process it and understand it. It's really important that we don't give false reassurance. If they ask us about something and it happened, don't pretend it's not true. Don't pretend it didn't happen. They're hearing about it from other sources that we can't control. And even though our instinct is that we want to protect them, we don't want them to hear this terrible situation. We don't want this situation to have happened at all. Actually, when we don't tell them what's going on, it can make them feel less secure, like they can't trust us, or they start to fill in gaps and imagine scenarios that, if possible, are even worse than what we're actually seeing. It's important to use prompts to encourage communication. So I've written here some things that you can ask. You can say, I noticed you heard us talking about Israel. Is there anything that you wanted to know? Do you have any questions? Did they discuss it today in school? And really important that they know that even if they don't have questions right now, they can discuss it with you later. You can ask me later on if you've got anything that comes up. And again, we don't need to have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. That is the truth. We don't know. We're very confused. These are very uncertain times. And it's okay to say that we don't know what will happen. Alongside that, one of the key principles is to hold on to some sense of hope. And what does hope look like in this situation? It's to say that it won't always be like this, and it won't always be like this. And alongside that, we talk about things that people are doing to help the situation. Soldiers helping to protect people, people are raising money. And I think even saying things like, even Rishi Sunak spoke on a shore and told everyone that he's supporting us in this fight. This is reassuring and gives some sense of hope. You'll find that you'll probably have to have multiple conversations about this. They can't process all the information in one go, and not all the information needs to be shared in one go. So be prepared for that. Another principle is calming. We sometimes call this emotional regulation. Be aware that the way that you respond to your child will really impact the way they respond to the situation. And sometimes when we go into these conversations feeling very anxious and upset ourselves, it doesn't help. So think about how to share how you're feeling with friends, with family, before you then talk with your children. And I think it's really important to aware that parenting in this kind of context can be really strange. You might find that your younger children don't get it. They almost certainly won't properly get it. Even older children sometimes can act in ways that are contrasting with our own feelings, our own emotions. And there's a kind of dissonance. So be mindful of it and think about how to modulate your own response in reaction to your children's behavior. It is important to notice, seek, and highlight positive moments. You shouldn't feel guilty about having a nice time with your kids. And you should also reassure them that it's okay to have good times and to do the things that they enjoy. And I really think that finding light in dark moments is important. It's an important source of resilience for us all. Encouraging them to spend time with their friends. And I think often they don't spend time with their friends because they feel like they're the only ones that feel that the way they do. But reassure them that other people also feel like this. They'll also be finding it hard. With all of this, we should model this behavior. We should model the management of strong and difficult emotions. And that really doesn't mean pretending that we're okay or putting on a brave face. Show them how we manage our fears and our emotions by talking and sharing with others, spending time with people we love, and say things to them like, you know, it helps me when I'm sad to spend time together with you doing nice things. You can even thank them. And really important is that you help them to take breaks and switch off. Obviously, you need to model this too. Engage in active tasks, things that are kind of active, engaging, distracting, physical are good, sports, walks, but also things like baking and art. And as much as possible to do this either with you or with other people. And encourage them to think about the things for themselves that make them feel good when they usually feel stressed in usual situations. So it may be going to clubs or watching TV or spending time with their family. These are all things that can make them feel better. And so now when there's heightened stress, it's reasonable to think it will help here too. Very important to be kind and compassionate to yourself and to others. What does being kind to yourself look like? That means really maintaining self-care, keeping a healthy routine, taking breaks from news and social media, be with people, go outside, do exercise, and really important to avoid unhealthy coping strategies like drinking too much alcohol, engaging in risky behaviors. Try and keep yourself healthy so that you can help keep those around you healthy too. And of course, ask for help if you need it. It's also important to be kind to each other. One of the final principles in these models of how you respond to people during these kinds of situations is a sense of connectedness. So you check in with friends and with family, those who live in Israel and those that don't. And be aware that most people in our community have some kind of connection to Israel. And obviously some people are more connected, some people are less connected, but everyone has some kind of connection. Everyone feels affected in some way. And, you know, try to avoid comparisons. Everyone feels bad, even if some people are very, very entrenched in Israeli society. Encourage compassion. The last thing is to really find ways to help. Helping others is very important in bringing back a sense of agency, affecting this kind of helplessness and uselessness that I think we're all feeling now. So activate people, get them busy. You donate money, you can send letters to people in Israel, support Israelis who are stranded here in the UK. But really, I think it's important to find ways to help your children to help others. Finally, I want to say that we are not alone in this. We need to remember that we've got friends, we've got family, we've got community. And I think also critical to understand that we do have the support from people outside of our community. If you do need help, please do access it. First of all, we have all our usual lines of support. So you can turn to your school. And this is true whether or not your school is a Jewish school or a non-Jewish school. If it's a non-Jewish school, you may need to give some more context, some more background, some more explanation, but they are there to support us. You can get support from your shul, from your GP, and there are also various helpline and text messaging services that can help. And of course, Pages can also support. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Hannah Abrahams. I'm an educational and child psychologist, and I'm also a mother of 3 children. So I think I wanted to sort of give you that information with regards to the context with which I speak this evening to you. Talia and I are going to sort of overlap and interlap with each other, but I wanted to talk a lot about managing the anxiety. One of the first things, and it might be slightly bizarre on a webinar to introduce you to, is the idea of something called a koala cuddle. We're all feeling really anxious, understandably, and really stressed. And this is one of the activities that I often do with children in a therapeutic context. I ask them to put their hand on their heart and just feel their heart beating and just sit with it for a moment and see what happens. There's something magical that happens because essentially what you're doing is you're tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system and you're allowing yourself to reduce your stress and just bringing the temperature down a little bit. So what I'm also doing is I'm working to notice your needs as parents, as carers, as teachers, and as staff. You might have heard this phrase before, but it is essential. Put your own oxygen mask on first. In order to meet the needs of the children, you have to meet your needs too. It's really important in times like these, particularly for young children and adolescents, to keep a sense of predictability, to maintain a routine and a sense of purpose. And I thought it was so important that before we were talking about the importance of carrying on going to school and the school day working as it should do, because that's containing in itself. Keeping connected and conversations going is so vital. And that's from children from reception age all the way through up to sixth forms and university. We can and we must validate children's fears and worries. And you can do that by being curious with your child, by having open conversations, by trying to find out what it is they're really thinking, not by probing them, but by noticing. And often we call that watchful waiting. You observe and you see the behavior of your child and what's the message that they're really trying to give you in these moments. Just as Talia also said, it's really important not to take away those hopeful moments and nuggets of joy. Only yesterday, I was sent a video by my cousin in Israel of her 12-year-old dancing. And I think the power of that was palpable. It's so important that those moments continue to happen. And in those moments, you tap into all of your 5 senses. So you will already have a wonderful toolbox of ideas and creative things that you do with your child. What's in your toolbox? What are the sorts of things that you do with your child that bring those moments of hope and joy? Is it baking cookies? Is it going at the moment just to collect conkers in the park? Is it painting mindfully together? Is it just sitting and eating a meal together? And that's enough. Amongst the news, it's also really important to name the helpers and the heroes, because you'll always find them. They're there. Just today, we were talking about the fact that in Tel Aviv, and I'm sure around the whole of Israel, families and children were putting together boxes of food for soldiers, of activities for younger children and games and such. Those are the helpers. No child is born with a sense of emotional regulation and emotional literacy skills. It's what we do as parents, teachers, and psychologists to support their development throughout. So we need to name their feelings in order to tame them. It might be that your child comes home and they're really angry and they go and sort of punch into their pillow, or they scream at you about the fact that you forgot to put their cheese in their lunchbox. That's not really the message that they're giving you. It's something much deeper. And turning around and saying to your child, I can see that you're feeling really angry right now, or I'm wondering if this is what you're feeling. Again, be curious. Help to clarify the facts. That doesn't mean to overshare. We've talked about that a lot this evening. But use appropriate and true language. And particularly with younger children and those who may be neurodiverse, use visual aids. I know that there are a number of social stories which are incredibly helpful, which have been put together, particularly with regards to describing the current situation to children in appropriate context and language. Answer questions as factually as you possibly can. And if in that moment it feels too much for you, ask another adult to do so. It's okay to say to your child, I can't do this right now. I need to have some time. And you're modeling a sense of reflectiveness and mindfulness to your child. We've talked quite a bit about social media and news scrolling for teens and tweens. Looking at the news can provide us with an illusion of control. It works to sort of help to make us feel as though we are contained. If we are up to date, we are doing something. But instead, in many instances, we weaken and we tire ourselves out. Modeling when to turn off the TV is really important for you and your family right now. I think particularly in England at the moment, we may feel a lot of guilt, a feeling that by not connecting in terms of watching the news constantly will mean that we care less. That's not true. It can often be that this behavior is related to something that we call survivor's guilt. But there is a very strong need at the moment for self-preservation and self-protection, because that is how you're going to help yourselves and your children best. Tell your child that the videos and testimonies that are being shown on various different social media outlets are bigger and more cruel in many instances than our souls can contain. Continuous scrolling can be seen as junk food for the mind. It's a really important piece of information. So what are the things that you might do? Well, one thing and one lovely activity to do is to encourage your child to do something called visualizations, talking about things that are really meaningful to your child and what that situation or scenario looked like. Was it a special party? Was it a holiday that you've been on? Was it just a walk in the park? Bring that image to life and give your child permission to take themselves to that image in their mind when everything feels all-consuming and too much. You'll have to practice it with them, but it's really, really powerful and a very helpful way of calming down the nervous system. A body scan is another activity that can be incredibly dynamic and productive. For some younger children and even older ones, you might literally get them to lie down on the floor, draw around each other's bodies and say, where do you feel love? Where do you feel kindness? Where are you feeling anger? What color is it? Scale that, talk to them about how to bring those big feelings down. What is it that you can do together? Move. I think often we can be very sedentary and we know that that impacts our sense of stress and our children's. I know that that will be happening in schools, but if you notice it at the weekends or the evenings, just doing a silly dance around the kitchen is more than fine. Lots of schools use something called zones of regulation. And that is about, again, naming feelings in order to tame them by associating them with different colours and also impressing upon the fact that feelings are fluid. They move and change. You will notice that as adults, you would have had in the past 72 hours feelings of utter despair, horror, grief, and anger. And you will also have had moments where you've laughed and you've smiled. Remind your children of that. Just as Talia said, allow times for decompression. It's fine for them to sit and watch a movie or just to talk to their friends on the phone. If they're too exhausted, and often emotional kind of stress can cause utter exhaustion to do their homework, then explain that. For children who are neurodiverse, the use of social stories and very clear boundaries and discussion with regards to the current situation is really important. Anger from lots of children and adults is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's going on. It's far easier for us as humans to show our real frustration and anger than it is to say, I feel really frightened. I'm scared right now. I'm not sure how I feel about getting on the tube. Mirroring that back with your child provides them with the language that they need. Make sure that you and your child are using your fact glasses. Or talk to them about what it is they've heard and how you know together whether it is the truth or not. Hundreds of thoughts are going to pop into their heads and yours right now. Focus on the facts and the truth. So I want to caveat this slide with, there is no antidote right now. This is really frightening for everybody. But as a parent, your words, your presence, your self-awareness, your ability to say, I need some time right now. Your reflective nature, your recognition of your own resilience and that of the community and system around you, your honesty, your ability to know when to take a break, your ability to hang on to boundaries in order to create a sense of containment for your family, and your knowing that you're good enough as a parent right now are critical. I'm going to pass you on to David Myers.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you, Talia, for all your words. We're living in very difficult times. That's the reality. And no matter where we turn, we're seeing images that we don't want to see. We're hearing messages that we don't want to hear. And the reality is that we're hurting. And sometimes being a good parent is difficult. At times like this, being a good parent is extremely difficult. Trying to give support to your children when at the same time we actually need the support for ourselves can be a very difficult dynamic. The truth is there are no words that can express how we feel. It hurts us at a very deep level to see people being killed because they are Jewish. Every one of us knows at least somebody that knows someone that was killed. Many of us, unfortunately, have got first-hand experience of having relatives and friends that have been killed for nothing more than them being Jewish. Internalizing that is difficult. Communicating that to our children is extremely difficult. The reality is that just like we need to be careful and monitoring what our children are seeing on social media, even more so we need to be careful about what they are seeing in the home. Children, in essence, magnify the emotions of their parents. And if they see us being upset, they will be more upset. And whilst there are absolutely a need for times for us to be able to express our emotions, we need to ensure that we are protecting our children. This whole evening has been about protecting our children, protecting them physically, security side, and protecting them emotionally through their well-being. And in essence, you are at the very forefront of that. I love the fact that there are over 2,000 people who in 2 days have signed up in order to hear this presentation. It says everything about this community. It says everything about you as parents. But it's really important that you ensure that you are taking a measured and sensible approach to this. One of the lessons that we learned from COVID is the impact of closing schools and locking children up. When we thought we were protecting them, actually, we have sown some deep-seated, enormously challenging emotional issues for children that have felt isolated and alone and fearful. It's even more true with regards to this instance today. If we were to take actions which make our children feel that they can't walk through the streets or can't go into the schools, we're not doing them any favors. And therefore, as much as we want to be protective, we also need to be measured. And you, most importantly, need to be measured in how you communicate that to your children, and indeed how you interact with the schools. We are phenomenally fortunate to have the most wonderful country which protects us, cares about us, and as we have seen from the leadership, from all political parties, will not tolerate the terrorism that has been seen in Israel. The police and the CST work tirelessly to protect us, and an enormous thank you must go to them for all the work that they do. I want you to know that over the last 2 days, I have met in a closed room meeting with the counter-terrorist team. We had an opportunity this morning to meet with head teachers and chairs of governors of all your schools with the counter-terrorist team and the CST to discuss many of the issues, and obviously in deeper detail than has been discussed at this meeting. But it should come as an enormous reassurance to you that this isn't just about painting a picture, but that deep behind that picture, there are proper systems that are taking place to protect our community and to ensure constantly that the threats are monitored and at the right time action taken. But at the same time, those actions need to be measured and they have to be informed. The reality is that we are all victims. We are victims of what we have seen. And to be frank, we become victims of what Hamas make us see. We need to overcome that adversity. The Jewish community in England was built on the ashes of the Holocaust. And many times I go around and I look at the incredible synagogues that were established and schools that were established by a community that had nothing, that came out of the Holocaust literally with their shirts on their back. But they knew that the answer to Nazism was to build Jewish homes, was to build Jewish schools, and was to build Jewish shuls. The answer to Hamas, the answer to their hatred is exactly the same thing. We have to keep the life of our community alive. We have to be able to stand up and be proud. We have to be able to answer them and say, no matter how much you try, we will not cower. I yesterday traveled up to Liverpool and back. And I have to tell you, from nowhere, people came up to me to tell me, we want you to know that we support you. It was heartwarming. And whilst there are people out there that hate us, there are many, many, many more that care and love and want us to be protected. So let's not misinterpret the messages. Let's not get confused about our actions. Let's stand up and be proud. And let's also give a thought for those in Israel who in reality are facing far, far greater challenges than us. Our hopes and our prayers are with our brothers and sisters in Israel. Please God, we should all see peace and serenity for everyone very soon. Thank you for joining.